all the description, all the measurements of everything we're talking about today in the description. You know, so you can't mess anything up if this is the route you're going. But yeah, these are carbs out of a Kawasaki sport bike, and they'll serve me well. The intake side is kind of special. I will have to get the stock air box for these, and it'll be actually kind of nice because it'll come up, curve up like that, and it'll look nice for what I'm doing inside my car, and it should fit without issues. And then the back side of the carbs, they're 38 millimeter inside bore, so they're first size carb. So in theory, each single one of these is rated for 38-ish CFMs each, which is perfect, because that's what I hope to be pumping out on my 1.9. That's not a crazy big number. That's something realistic. And I finally just got my intake manifold from Dan ST Engineering. This thing is pretty sweet. I'm super excited for it. It cost me a lot of money, but once I bought it and they confirmed a few things, it came to my door within a week and a half. Or I should say, within a week they had this done, and then a week later it was at my door. So pretty impressed. But the runner itself, yeah, you can see I have blue couplers on here. I wanted black, but they wrote me and they said, hey, we have a shortage of black couplers. We can get you some, but it would be another week or two. They said, or you can have blue or red. We have those on hand. They're the same price. I said, oh, well, thank you much for emailing me. That was very courteous of them. And I said, yeah, go ahead, switch it to blue. I'd like these kind of soon. Blue is fine, you know, Ford blue. But when it's all said and done, you won't really see these much anyways. I wanted black because then you couldn't really tell they're there. But yeah, they have blue ones, so they sent me them after I confirmed it. And yeah, came in the mail not too long after. I do have the clamps for all these. The couplers and the clamps all come in this giant bag, so there's a whole bunch of clamps there. I didn't want to put them on because these are not permanent yet. But yeah, it's vast in my glory. I'm going to set the camera down real quick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this manifold so you can see what it's about. It's not too hard. It's just a two-hand procedure. But here we are. I had them put on this, they call it a vacuum balance bar, and that it does what it says. It's a bar that balances vacuum amongst all four of the runners. Because in a street car, you have a manifold vacuum, and that manifold vacuum source will power a lot of functions on the car, like the brake booster, the distributor, and AC controls. So if you have all those, you'll really want this balance bar. They say for a race car you can get by just with this one main bung here, just for the brake booster, but you know, for everything else you'd want this. And they say that this balance bar also helps give you steady pulses to, or I should say even pulses to the brakes. So when you're using the brakes, it won't feel pulsed because it's working off all four instead of this guy, which is pulling off just one. But when I get the car running, we'll experiment, because maybe you only need the one for your brake booster, but for a distributor, definitely you want all four and this guy. But otherwise, yeah, it's all machine and TIG welded aluminum with completely brass fittings, which is pretty cool. These hoses are nice, and what I like about these is these will allow me to sync my carbs as well. The one thing I don't really like is that this balance bar is on the bottom, but when you zip tie it to the runners, it's really nice. You know, it doesn't really get in the way. I know in some carb models and some valve covers, they kind of take up this spot here, and if you have the factory mechanical fuel pump, you'll have fuel lines running above here. So in some ways it's best that this balance bar is underneath here. But what I might end up doing is I might still drill 1, 2, 3 holes and then tap each one of them for the common thread of a vacuum sink gauge. I'll lock that over. I'll show you what those fittings are like, because I understand that not all of you are power sports mechanics, but this is what we're looking at. So so usually there would be a screw here. You unthread that screw, replace it with this brass little nozzle screws in there, and then you attach a hose there for your sink gauge. And then your sink gauge is just four vacuum gauges, kind of like these guys. This is just a single, but I have a rack of 4. You hook them all up, and then each cylinder will draw a different amount of air. That's just how it works. That's why we synchronize carbs. So you want to adjust the carbs accordingly, and you do that here. There's going to be 3 adjustments between the 4 carbs, and each one of them changes the throttle valve of each, because depending on how each of the cylinders draws in fuel or air, both actually, you'll need to set these accordingly. Otherwise you'll have poor throttle response. You'll have poor throttle settle. That's when you let off the gas. It won't perfectly sit back down at idle. When they're all off, it won't idle very well, very smooth. And it'll affect your idle to off idle and mid-range power, because each cylinder is drawing a different amount of air. It's like if you had 2 Webers on here and one of the idle jets was plugged on one of these guys, it would run like crap. But getting a little off topic, I wanted to look at the manifold itself, because, well, this is what you buy. You can get carbs anywhere. And Dan ST Engineering, they have plenty of these manifolds to choose from for various engines. They make a bunch of these for the CVH. They make a bunch for Z-Tex and newer Durtex, mostly 4-banger stuff. And it's cool. And I believe they're all aluminum. At the end of the day, they all look similar to this. And for the CVH, you can get a few different intake patterns. This is the most common one. I believe it's the carbureted intake. So any carbureted CVH ought to look similar to this. With a coolant port in the center, just like that. Some have slightly different intake ports where they're the same height, but they're not as wide on all 4 of those. And then on the far end of the head, there will be an additional coolant passage here, kind of like that center one. And even though this will bolt up, with the dual coolant passage one, the ports don't really line up. You'll have overlaps like this. Instead of a perfect window here, you'd have something like this, even though all the bolts line up. And, well, if you got a manifold like this, absolutely nothing would cover that outer coolant passage, which can give you some serious headaches. When you order it, they'll ask you which one you need. If they don't, you'll want to contact them right away if you have anything other than the common one here. And then for the coolant passages, they just replace them with these brass nipples. They say if you don't have a heater core, you don't need this one. I have a heater core in my car. It's a street car, so I left the nipple there. I will be using that. That should work well. So now the ports themselves. The runners are welded quite nice. Like I said, they're TIG welded. And these little guys that they put on here, it looks like they epoxy all these nipples once they tap them so they can't leak. what I might do is go in and then grind them smooth to the port wall so they don't protrude like that. Because, like I said, all of them are already epoxied, so me grinding in them, they won't change shape. I just wanted to take all these hoses off so I'm not getting shavings down inside here that I can't really get out. But that will be good. Once I'm done, we're rinse it out. Good to go. Each one of these parts, they have a decent texture on the inside. You know, you can kind of see it there. On the outside, they're brushed, and then on the inside, they have a decent texture. That's about what you want for a carbureted car. Keeps the fuel atomized, keeps it from forming droplets on the walls. Yeah, but I will be going through here and porting these. You can see some places like this, there's a little bit of a divot there where they made the outside weld. You know, but they had pretty good penetration. It's just that area needs to be built up. But we will see about that. And I'll say why in a little bit, but I want to show you the rest of the parts here. Pretty much all these angled ones in the short turn, they all have a sharp joint. We're going to try to smooth out all those. It's like that in all these. The outer two are the worst. It's a pretty sharp turn there, so we're just going to smooth out all those. And then on the gasket mating side, these are kind of funny. This plate here itself is funneled, and it's funneled in. So the port walls, the inside of the port is bigger around than the inside of this mating flange. So, because these are kind of made port matched to whatever head you bolt them onto. Well, these openings are actually bigger than my head's ports, believe it or not, by about 1 millimeter in each direction. So I'm going to go ahead and gasket match this intake manifold to my head, and then we should be in good standings. Now the other end I was talking about, the inlet, I want to port match these to my carbs. So my carbs are, if we look at the other side here, fumble around a little bit. So yeah, this is the throat, the bore of my carburetor. From inside to inside, it's 48 millimeters. On the inside of these guys, inside to inside, it's 47. So I'm going to do a little bit of port matching here on each single one of them, because then I ought to have really nice flow from my carb into my manifold. And I think I'm going to give these a slight bevel on the inside, because no matter how I install these, there will be a gap, you know, between this and the carburetors. That's just the way it goes, because these are not, you know, these are just regular silicone couplers. They don't have a band in the center like most do on motorcycle carbs. I'll show you this guy over here. You know, you can see this is made specifically for this head, and because of that, it's got a shoulder. Yep. So you can kind of see that there's a shoulder there, following the band clamp. So that shoulder there is what helps airflow, keeps it from getting caught in any shoulders. So we will be conquering that. One possible solution, I might have to cut all these down 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, whatever, and then that will allow these runners to press in further, because the closer I can make them, the better flow I have, and then also the more room I have behind these, between these carburetors and my firewall. You know, so there's only benefits to doing that. They kind of just make these at a random length, and it's good because sometimes you need them long, you know, depending on how your car setup is. But yeah, you see there, I wrote down 37 millimeters across because that's what they are. Carbs are 38. And here you see I wrote down 33 by 37. That is the size of the port, and that is, I shouldn't say the port, that's the size of the port opening in this flange, because like I said, it's bigger inside than it is on the outside here. Or at least it is on the bottom. On the sides it's alright, but I might have to do some aluminum welding. There's some areas in here where it's scooped out, and I don't know why. It's scooped out in some areas really bad in these bottom corners. And I know, you know, when you port the ports on the head, you need to do that to match your intake manifold, because you can see that all of these, the ports come in from a central location, fanning out, whereas these are made for your intake ports to go straight in, you know, not a fan or anything. So there will be a little bit of, you know, port redesigning, because I have to aim them all in from a center location, and that's why these have a slight scoop on the sides. But the issue is they're extremely exaggerated in some spots. But when I get to port matching, that might all disappear. Worst case scenario, have to fill that in with weld, and then reshape it, make it right. But we'll see. But otherwise, yeah, well, that's kind of my only issue with those. If it wasn't for these weird scoops in it, and then the weird funnel of this manifold flange, this thing, I'd give it a, you know, 8 out of 10, because then all you'd have to do is just fix these sharp turns that I was talking about on the inside, because they're pretty drastic. But that's easily fixed. So yeah, I'd give it 7.5 out of 10. And it was kind of pricey to get this. I don't know the cost in pounds, but to have all of this, you know, with the couplers, the bands, the vacuum balance bar, and then the intake manifold, then to ship it to Wisconsin from Britain, all of that was $390 US. That's a lot of money, you know, and that is before your carburetor. So that, you know, if you're kind of looking forward to doing a setup like that, like that's something you need to keep in mind. You know, everything just the stuff to use bike carbs will be $390. You know, just for this. Carbs themselves could be anywhere from, you know, $100 to $300, depending on which carbs you want to use. Again, it won't have to be these. You can use pretty much anything with a 36 to 38 millimeter bore. You'd be in good shape. They just have to be an inline 4. But then, you know, also for cost, you have to consider an air box. Like I said, I'll be using an air box from the bike these came off of. Well, even for a broken air box that I can cut up, because I'll have to cut it up, that's going to cost me $70. You know, throw that into the mix, and then you do have to jet all these carbs. Otherwise, it will run poorly, if even at all. You know, so you know, when it comes to that, you have a few options. You can get a jet kit; those are $100 or so. Or if you know about what jets to buy, you can buy them onesie twosies. Each little brass jet inside of here will be $2 to $5 each. But then there's other things like different needles, different springs in these slides, and then shims for the needles. You know, all that stuff adds up. So all in all, you could be looking at a total cost of, you know, $500, $600, $700, depending on what kind of air box, carbs, intake manifold you need, and accessories here. So keep all that in mind. I went this route because these should perform as good as Weber's, and in the mid-range, these will probably outperform Weber's. These will also give me a spectacular throttle response and have great street ability with some impressive fuel economy, I'm hoping. You know, because the cool thing with vacuum slides is they only give you what you need. So when you're doing like 3,500 RPMs going down the road at 40, you know, your throttle could be open a bunch, but this will only be as opened as your vacuum requires. That also helps for throttle response, fuel economy, streetability, all of that. It just makes these spectacular. And really the only trick to it is knowing how these work. So we'll leave it at that for now. When I get into making these work, when I have these all ported and finished, the same with my head ported and finished, we'll have another video. But until then, ta-ta for now.